Hi, and welcome to Northwest Book Talk. I'm your host, Patty Grasher, and today's interview is with Toni Woodard. She is the author of I'm Fine, A Practical Guide to Life with Chronic Pain. I probably shouldn't be doing that with such enthusiasm. Chronic pain is not a fun thing. So anyway, welcome, Toni, to the program.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
Okay. So let's get started with your book, because I have to tell you, when I first looked at the book, and I thought it was going to be a good book, but I thought I just read reading about pain. It's
Sure,
like, you know, and then I got into it, and it was written so engagingly, and so that you didn't feel like you were in the doctor's office waiting for the next verdict, you know. So tell me how you got started with writing a book like this.
Well, I've been a writer for a number of years. I've been a blogger, actually. I don't have any professional training in writing, but I wrote a lot in my blog about my pain experience. I wrote about other things too, but as I was grappling with the things that happen to your life when you live with pain every day, I would write about it and just to work through emotions and, you know, sometimes just to share an experience. Then I was looking for a book that talked about pain not from the medical standpoint, not from here's a good diet, here's some exercises. I wanted a book that would help me deal with the depression, the fear, the anxiety, the relationship stuff that it kind of, you know, got in the way of. And I couldn't find that book. And I kept thinking, well, maybe I should write the book if I can't find it. And then the pandemic happened, and I had a lot of time and not as many excuses not to write the book. So I finally started writing it. I knew that one of the things that I wanted to include was the experience of going into surgery. That not everybody who's in pain has to go down a surgical route, but there are some people who do. And I knew I wanted to include some parts about that. And in May of 2020, I had to have a foot surgery. And I thought, well, if I want to include this in my book, this is the perfect time to start, because I want that experience of surgery to be as real and as in the moment as I can. And if you've gone through a surgery, you try to put that behind you. So I started writing as I was preparing for the surgery. So I started writing in May of 2020 because my foot needed to be fixed.
Oh, that's good. You know, one part that I liked in your book was that you had a best friend, and you felt that she really understood you, right? And then one day we were having coffee or something like that, and she asked you, what was it really like? And you were like, oh my God, I don't know how to answer this, right? And then you came up with the spoon theory, which is so amazing. And I would love for you to just kind of share that story and how it's been such a vital part of your life and everyone's.
Well, and actually, I need to say, I'm not the inventor of the spoon theory.
Right.
It was a woman named Christina Miserandillo. I don't know how to say her name correctly, but she came up with it some years ago. She had lupus, and she was trying to explain to a friend what it's like to live with chronic pain. And she came up with this idea of using spoons. And so she just grabbed a bunch of spoons off. They were in a restaurant, grabbed spoons off tables, and said, okay, so when you have chronic pain or a chronic condition, you have this many spoons every day, and it's a limited amount, and everything you do costs you a spoon. So whether it is taking a shower, it's making a meal, it's commuting to work, it's taking care of your children, each one of those things costs a spoon. And you don't get to replenish them. You have this finite amount. And so it's a fantastic analogy and metaphor, particularly for people who don't live with chronic pain, to understand that everything that you do is a decision. If I want to make dinner and I want to chat with a friend, over coffee in the same day, I have to decide if I have enough spoons or enough energy to do that. And if I don't, then I have to choose which one I'm going to do. And so I included it in the book because as soon as I read that theory some number of years ago and I shared it with my husband, we started talking in spoons right away. When we were, it's like, I really can't go to that dinner party tonight. I don't have the spoons for it. As we lived with it more, my husband and I incorporated the idea of forks. And so where spoons represent the physical energy, we have forks representing the sort of mental, psychological energy. And the same thing can take both a spoon and a fork. And so we talk in terms of forks as well. So we do a lot of discussion of flatware in my household. But I really encourage in the book anybody who lives with a chronic condition to have those people who are closest to you in your life read the spoon theory so that they understand this shorthand, because it can communicate so much so quickly. Say, I just don't have the spoons right now. And then it's understood that it's not because I don't want to, I just can't. And that takes a lot of the burden off of the pained person to have to go into a huge explanation, and you can just say, I just don't have the spoons.
Because that also brings up another thought that you said, that people with chronic pain are really good at masking,
Yes.
at putting on this persona of I'm okay, I'm fine, and then sometimes when they're feeling good, they actually are able to let down their guard, and that's when other people think, "Oh my God, you're really hurting."
Yes, it's such a conflict, because those days when I'm feeling good, I don't wear that mask quite as tightly. And you might start to see some of that pain that I usually mask so well. And so it can be so hard, because somebody will say, oh, you look great. And I'm like, yeah, it's because I'm wearing the mask and I feel really terrible. And somebody say, oh, you're not having a good day. It's like, oh, I am. I'm just not masking it as well because I'm feeling good.
Yeah, I think that brought the book, brought out in your book so well, was that it helps people who don't have chronic pain see that just because someone looks like they're, I'm okay, and they're not. And it gives a greater understanding, I think, a greater empathy. So it's the kind of book that I think almost any caregiver should be using, because you need to understand, like you said, the book brings out the emotion, all the range of emotions that go through with chronic pain. So can you share a little bit about some of those emotional journeys that you've experienced with chronic pain?
Sure. Well, I have chronic back pain, and it's from an injury when I was in my late 20s. I actually coughed, which can sound very simple and terrifying at the same time, but I ended up having to not work. I had to retire at 32, which sounds like a dream, but it wasn't. And because of my back issues and my career stopping without my permission, I ended up in a depression that went undiagnosed, probably for about 7 years, if I look back. It was, I didn't know what my purpose was. I had these plans and these goals for my life, and I had to abandon them. And I just didn't know what I was supposed to be doing with my life in my 30s and beyond when I didn't have a job and a career path. There's also a lot of fear with pain. With a chronic condition, you kind of get to know, like I've gotten to know my back. I know my early warning systems of, okay, the back of my leg is hurting, then I know that I'm doing too much and I need to back off for a few days. So I've gotten to know that pain. But there's a lot of fear with new pain. And I actually finally started talking to a cognitive behavioral therapist just about 3 years ago, because I found myself, every time I had new pain in a new body part, I was just spiraling downward in, oh my gosh, this is now going to be a chronic condition. I'm going to have a surgery. This is just one more thing I'm going to have to deal with. And I've had that with 3 different body parts. And so it wasn't an unreasonable assumption, but I thought, I cannot age like this. I can't go into my 60s and 70s and hopefully 80s with every time I'm feeling a new ache or pain, I feel like I'm going to have a chronic issue for the remainder of my life. So there's a lot of fear and anxiety with that. And so therapy has helped a lot with that. Just kind of cognitive behavioral therapy is just new ways of thinking about things, kind of taking what's in front of you as fact and trying to focus on the fact and not horribalizing what the situation is. There's also a fair amount of anxiety and fear and sadness when you're in pain because your relationships change and you can't do what you want to do. You can't always, be with the people you want to be. You have to cancel on appointments. So there's a lot of difficult emotions. And for me also, not being able to work, there was a real struggle with retirement, but nobody wants to hear somebody who's retired complain. So there's a lot of loneliness too.
Yeah, and I think what this book does, which is surprising, is that it brings out so much empathy, but you write it in such an engaging, you have a great sense of humor, and that comes through with the book, so that you don't feel like, oh, I just got to get through this book because it'll make me feel better, but I don't want to. You actually enjoy reading it, and I think, and feeling affirmed. I don't really have chronic pain, thank you God, but yeah, it helps me so much to understand. And like you said, everyone, as we get older, we're going to face different pain in our lives and different episodes of life struggles. So, and this is kind of a really good book to kind of just give you hope.
You're listening to Northwest Book Talk. I am your host, Patty Grasher, and I'm here today with Toni Woodard, the author of I'm Fine, A Practical Guide to Chronic Pain. We pause for a short appreciation break of our sponsors. When we come back, Toni will share more insights and tips to living with chronic pain.
The Columbian in Southwest Washington continues to offer the most comprehensive and consistent coverage of our region and our people, despite the challenges faced by local newspapers nationwide. Valued donations to our community-funded journalism project via the Local Media Foundation pays for local reporters to provide expanded and in-depth coverage of key local issues in print and online, including homelessness, transportation, and the environment. For the most thorough daily coverage, visit Columbian.com. Please consider donating or subscribing today.
If you're looking for pizza in East Vancouver, consider visiting Giuliano's Pizzeria in the Cascade Park Fisher's Landing neighborhood. For 37 years, Giuliano's has been a choice for Clark County residents. Giuliano's has a casual classic rock atmosphere, open 7 days a week, and they provide table service allowing you to relax and enjoy your meal with family and friends. If you have a large crowd to feed, Giuliano's can deliver 6 or more extra large pizzas to your office or event. More information can be found at giulianospizza.com.
Welcome back to Northwest Book Talk. I'm your host, Patty Grasher. I'm here today with Toni Woodard, the author of I'm Fine, A Practical Guide to Chronic Pain. Thanks for staying with us.
So now we want to go with, okay, you did cognitive therapy, but what about support groups? What about finding a friend or someone? Would you bring that up in the book? That's so important to keep going.
Yeah, I have a support group. It's 7 women. We're all online. We're on a secret group in Facebook. You can't find us, so don't try. We called ourselves Got Your Back, and we found ourselves, we found each other on Facebook some number of years ago. It was during a night of insomnia for me, painsomnia. And I was poking around on the internet, and somehow I found this group that doesn't exist anymore, but it was specific to the type of surgery that I had had. And it was based out of Australia, and there was all these people, and we were sharing a lot of information and comparing notes and experiences. And through that, as a subgroup, as that group kind of went in a different direction, we kind of pulled away and created our own group. And we're scattered all over the U.S. I've had the opportunity to meet everyone in person, but it took about 10 years before I was able to say I'd met each and every one of them. But they are a lifeline. What we have in common is chronic back pain. Some of us, it's from an injury. Some of us, it's from a couple people have scoliosis. A couple people have kind of congenital issues. And we range in age from, I think, early 30s to 70. And it's just, we've created this trust and this safe place where we can share the fears and ask the questions, ask questions about medication, where medication can be a really tricky, potentially dangerous topic depending on who you're asking and what, how public it is. And Some people are understandably very private about what sort of medications they take and dosages, but in this group, we can talk about that and side effects and issues with relationships, and it's just having a group of people, or even just a couple people, who can say me too. Empathy is an incredible healer, kind of not a physical healer, but a spiritual healer. It can, just knowing that somebody really gets it makes an incredible difference. So those women, my Got Your Back girls, they've been a lifeline.
So what would you suggest for someone who doesn't have a group, how they could find or start a group like that?
Well, it's the internet has, for me, been the godsend. When I first started dealing with my chronic back issues, there wasn't really an easy way for me to find other people in my situation. And so being able to just search online, whether it's Facebook or just chronic pain can be, depending on your issue, if it's like fibromyalgia or multiple sclerosis, those you might be able to find groups that can meet in person. But the thing about chronic pain is it's hard to commit to being able to show up at a meeting every week or every other week. And so I really have found for chronic issues, finding an online group, and Facebook at this point is so big that it seems that there's a group for just about everything and everybody. And it takes some time to kind of build trust. Like I said, with the group that I'm with, there were just a couple people that we seemed to connect in this other much larger group. So we would start chatting privately, and that's how we then pulled ourselves apart and created our own group.
Yeah, so let's go back, move ahead now with your book. So the COVID time encouraged you to write the book. So what was that journey of writing and finding a publisher or self-publishing? I'm not sure which route you went.
I went self-publishing. It took me about 2 years to write it. A fair amount of that time was spent procrastinating because some parts were very easy to write and some parts were difficult to write. The ones about dealing with being on long-term disability, Social Security disability, those were some hard chapters to write because there were experiences that I had that I put behind me and I didn't want to revisit. So I wrote the book kind of, it wasn't linear, so I wrote chapters as I wanted to write about them, and then I had to figure out how to organize it. I decided to do the self-publishing route because honestly I didn't know how to find a publisher. And I also, from podcasts and things I'd listened to, I realized that sometimes a publisher can sort of dictate some of the decisions that I wanted to make myself. And so I decided I wanted to do this myself. I knew how I wanted it to be presented. And so I wrote it myself. I did find somebody to do the cover for me because I am not artistic at all. And I spent a lot of time on YouTube learning how to format to Amazon standards. I learned a lot. Writing the book turned out to be relatively easy compared to the self-publishing route, and that was relatively easy compared to doing an audiobook. It was important to me to do an audiobook because a lot of times when you're in pain, just holding a book can be hard. Reading a book can be hard, but if you can just lay there and listen to a voice, that can sometimes be a lot more doable. So it was really important to me to have an audiobook option. But again, I knew how I wanted that presented, and so I didn't want to hire someone to do that. So I did that myself. So this is very much a self-driven project, which now my biggest challenge is finding the right hands to put the book in. Because my mission is to help people. My mission is to help people who live with chronic pain know they're not alone. And so my challenge now is to find those people.
Well, I think you're on your way with that. But so you got the book. Is it only through Amazon? And it's
at this point, yeah,
right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's Amazon, and then the audiobook is through Audible and iTunes.
So let me think a minute. break time. No. So what was the bigger challenge, doing an audiobook or formatting the book, or just maybe one led into the other?
I would say the audiobook was the biggest challenge because I had to learn the software as well as the process and try to figure out a quiet place in my house to do the recording. And then it was just a lot of talking. I kept kind of general notes about how long I was spending on this project. It took me about 60 hours to record a 6-hour book. I was just so tired of talking.
Right.
The publishing and going through all the formatting, that was actually fun. It felt good to stretch my brain in new ways. I actually enjoyed that, and I enjoyed that enough that I thought, well, maybe I could help other people do this. But at this point, I have sort of tried to forget a lot of those details. But it was kind of fun learning how to make an index and how to make sure headers were on the right side of the page and the left side of the page. So that part was actually kind of fun.
Yeah. So what about how the book's been received? What feedback have you gotten from people that read the book and are avid fans, or maybe not, but hopefully not? But
yeah, actually, I have been so humbled by some of the feedback that I've gotten. I have heard people say it's extremely validating. One of my favorite pieces of feedback was from a friend who gave it. She's a healthcare provider, so she gave it to one of her patients, and he didn't want to read the book. He did not. He was like, I don't want to read a book about pain, like you were saying earlier. And he came back to her office a month or two later, and he said, it's not a sad book. I liked it. It was a fun book. And I loved that because I understand, if you're in pain, reading about pain doesn't sound like it's that much fun. So that was wonderful feedback. The thing that also surprised me is I wrote this with the audience in mind being other people who are in pain. I've gotten a lot of feedback from people who love people who are in pain but aren't pained themselves. And like you were saying earlier, they have told me, I understand my husband so much better. I understand my daughter so much better. Thank you. This has given me insight that I don't know. People in pain don't talk a lot about their pain. And so it's like I gave people a kind of a peek behind the curtain of what it is that we're thinking and we're hiding. I also have had a couple folks who are one friend in particular who's in her 80s who's told me she's read the book several times. She said it just helps me kind of deal with aging. She doesn't have any particular pain, but some of the perspective and attitude shifts and just new ways of looking at things have given her kind of a more hopeful attitude towards just day-to-day life as an 82-year-old.
Yeah, that's what I was surprised too. I have to admit that, I took the project on because a mutual friend of ours who suffers from chronic pain really wanted this book to be on the air and to give it exposure because she got so much help from it. It was such a life-saving for her and her family. And but I started the book and then I put it down for like weeks. It's just like, I don't want to read about pain because it was like there's so much mental, and that's what you bring out. There's so much mental that goes in with pain that you just don't understand.
Yeah, and doctors don't talk about it, and understandably, because doctors are focused on the body part. I just wish medical doctors would hand out cards to therapists when they've got a chronic pain person in front of them, because there's just so much more than the physical aspect of pain that you deal with when you're living in pain every day.
So what are some of the strategies that you use to get through a pain-filled day that's maybe a little more than a regular day?
I kind of have a toolbox. It kind of depends on what I'm feeling. I've got a variety of medications, but I really prefer I have to learn how to stop. I have what I call recovery days. And on those days, I try to slow down and just spend a lot of quality time with my heating blanket or my heating pad. I've also found just going outside, even if I'm just sitting, because of my back issues, I can't really do a lot of exercise. I've tried doing all sorts of things, but the thing that helps me the most is walking. And so I like to go out and walk. There's often it takes a lot of motivation. I know that those first 15 minutes are not going to be that much fun. It's going to hurt. It's cold. Sometimes it's rainy. I really don't want to be out there, but there's never been a time I've regretted it once I push past those first 15 minutes. So I really try to avoid medication if I can, because I don't want to become dependent on it, and I want it to continue working in those moments. So I try to find other things. I also do acupuncture on a regular basis. One of the best therapies I found to help me in the long run with my pain was hypnosis. That was shocking to me, but it has helped me tremendously just to sort of mentally block some of the pain. I mean, some certainly still breaks through, but that has probably been one of the biggest unexpected helps for my pain.
Okay. Well, we're drawing to a close, and I just want, the last question is, are you planning on writing another book or a supplement to this book?
I've thought about it, and what I've thought about doing is writing from the perspective of the caregiver. There's been a couple opportunities with my husband where our roles have switched, where I've been the caregiver, but there's just so much focus on the patient that the caregiver is often going in 5,000 different directions and is exhausted, and no one's noticing. And they need to take care of themselves, but they're feeling guilty if they do because they've got somebody who seems much more in need than them. So I've thought about doing that. That's just going to require a lot of interviews. And I know that there's other books like that out there. So I need to do some research to make sure that what I would bring would be something new and not duplicate something that's already out there.
Oh. Well, thank you, Toni, for this very exciting interview. I hope people will pick up your book, whether they're in pain or know someone who's in pain, and that includes everybody in the world, really. So just thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
I think you did good.
That's it for today's episode of Northwest Book Talk. Big thanks to Toni Woodard for sharing her story and insights with us. If you'd like to learn more about Toni's book, I'm Fine, A Practical Guide to Chronic Pain, you can visit northwestbooktalk.com and click on Shows and Interviews and find Toni Woodard. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and share it with a fellow book lover. And if you're local to Vancouver, don't forget to check out kxrw.fm for more independent radio content that matters to your community. I'm Patty Grasher. Thanks for listening. And until next time, keep reading, keep writing, and keep exploring the many great writers, publishers, and booksellers in the Pacific Northwest.